Hello comrades, this is the Finnish Bolshevik. Before we get to the actual questions and answers, I want to give a shout out to Black Cat's new channel. It's called Red Guard Productions. He's been having some difficulties in real life, so he's making a new channel. So I'll put the link in the description if you want to check that out and subscribe. About market socialism. Market socialism is totally revisionist. It's a horrible idea. I mean, there's basically like three kinds of market socialism. There's the market socialism, which is the so-called workers' self-management system, which is what existed in Yugoslavia. I mean, it has a fancy name like market socialism and worker self-management. Worker self-management essentially means that it was economically decentralized, which means that there's no real economic planning, not properly, but it wasn't really workers' self-management. It was more like, you know, there's a factory director in every factory, or every enterprise has a director of some kind who's basically the boss who runs it, and then they all compete against each other on the market. That's pretty far from what I consider to be socialism. Now, like, some anarchists might find that appealing, but I personally don't. Then there's the Khrushchevite type of market socialism, which was somewhat based on the Yugoslav model. Like Mao famously pointed out that the reason why the relations between the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia improved was not because Tito corrected his mistakes. Instead, it was because the Soviets basically became crazy like Tito. And by the Soviets, he of course meant Khrushchev. So Khrushchev implemented a couple of economic reforms, and then Brezhnev as well. And they moved closer to a pretty similar market socialist system, which meant that there's still an economic plan, but it's not really that binding on the enterprises. They have more autonomy, it's more decentralized. There's still the factory directors in all the factories and enterprises, but they don't really have to follow the plan that strictly. And also, like, the biggest flaw of market socialism is basically the lack of planning, and number two, it encourages corruption. The factory directors in a market socialist system have typically always gotten much more money than the workers, you know, which is somewhat justified, because they have to be highly skilled and highly educated and all that to be able to run a company like that, depending on the company, of course. But basically the difference from a real socialist system to a market socialist system is that, for example, in the Stalin era, the factory directors were paid more, but they were not incentivized to exploit the workers. On the other hand, the workers themselves were monetarily incentivized to work harder. In the Khrushchev era and in Yugoslavia, it was kind of the opposite. The workers weren't really incentivized. Their wages actually kind of stagnated. You know, their wages didn't increase that much, despite the fact that productivity increased due to better technology and increased amounts of machinery and stuff. But they thought that if they offer basically monetary incentives to the factory directors, then they could somehow get more, you know, it would improve the economy. I mean, I'm not really sure if the market socialists, economists and theoreticians, I'm not entirely sure if they actually believed in their own shit or if they were just right-wing. But needless to say, it didn't exactly work out the way they thought. They thought it would improve the economy by making the Soviet system more competitive and stuff. All it did is it eroded planned economy, it created massive corruption, and it actually stagnated the economy. Like, market socialism is like the worst of both worlds. Normal capitalism works better than market socialism. Planned economy also works a lot better than market socialism. Even the Titoite, like, market socialism worked better than the Soviet one. The Soviet market socialist system basically just got worse as it was made more market-oriented. They still had pretty good growth in the 60s when they hadn't really changed all that much. They just privatized, like, machine tractor stations and some businesses like that. But then, like, in 1965, when the full-on market socialism kicked in, they started to stagnate heavily. When they implemented the Gorbachev reforms in 85, like, it was just shit. So yeah, I really dislike market socialism. Now, the third type of market socialism really is what anarchists want. They don't call it market socialism, but it's basically like mutualism. Like, mutualism is pretty similar to market socialism in many ways. It has a lot of the same problems, but mutualism together with, like, anarchism is basically just, you know, impossible and utopian. Market socialism has the same problems, but because it exists within the context of a state, it can still, like, defend itself and sustain itself relatively well. This is not to be confused with the Chinese economic model, like the current Chinese economic model, which they call socialism with Chinese characteristics, which is not really market socialist, it's state capitalist. Like, I hate to use the term state capitalist because all the trots and anarchists use it to basically mean whatever they don't like. But modern China is like the perfect example of what an actual state capitalist system looks like, because it's basically a state where there's a capitalistic private property market-oriented economy where the state just owns a bunch of shit. What's your stance on Israel and Palestine? Oh boy. Like, all these questions are so broad. Well, of course I support Palestine. I fucking hate Israel. Israel is a horrible, racist, genocidal apartheid regime that just, like, occupies Palestine, steals their land constantly, starves Palestine of any kind of needed resources, bombs their infrastructure and their power plants and their water supply, kills thousands of people each year. You know, the Muslims who live in Israel, who have Israeli citizenship, they're basically treated like shit. But at least they have, like, legal rights. I mean, they're treated like shit, don't get me wrong. But at least they have, like, nominal, legal rights. Whereas Palestinians who don't have Israeli citizenship, who only live in Israeli-occupied zones, they're basically living under martial law. The Israeli soldiers just, like, kill them and shoot them just, like, willy-nilly, just like that, and just terrorize them constantly.
Should the US be dismantled by the socialist revolution? I mean, being divided with a black state, Chicano state, native state, etc. That depends a lot on the circumstances. I think black people and all the other nationalities, they deserve territorial autonomy if they want it, but some people have pointed out black people in the US don't necessarily care about a black state. I mean, they don't really know about these ideas necessarily, like, it's not a mainstream idea anymore. But regardless, if they want that, then it should be granted to them. But I don't know if that would dismantle the U.S. It could be part of the US, like, those could be part of the US, or, states in the US. There could be multiple states in the US which would be part of the black nation, for example. I don't know. I'm in favor of it if that's what the people want, and if that's, practical at the time when that would happen. What are your views on the US 2016 presidential election? I think Hillary Clinton is gonna win. Trump is not gonna win. People were freaking out about Trump, but, I mean, Trump is fucking stupid, and he's racist and all that shit, but, I mean, if he were to be elected, he would just act like a normal US president. Like, people are so worried that, if Trump is gonna be the president, then he's gonna, like, nuke the world or something. But, I mean, the US has had stupid presidents before. They've had fucking George W. Bush twice in a row. These presidents, they might be idiots, but they have advisors and all these people telling them what to do. Trump wouldn't do anything too crazy. But that said, he's not gonna win. Like, Clinton is gonna win, most definitely, and things will go on as usual. The US will bomb countries like it used to do and like it's still doing. They will probably invade another country like they've always done. When it's a new president, they always invade another country. The question is what country? I was in a Skype call with a bunch of American comrades when we were thinking about this. Like, Yemen would be my guess, but Yemen is kind of small, so I think they might want something bigger. They have an appetite for more imperialism. But I think Iran is a bit too big. They can't really take Iran, I don't think. I mean, it's possible they'll intervene in Yemen, they'll intervene in maybe like the Philippines. They'll continue their war in Syria and Afghanistan, maybe, I don't know. Do you know who was Frantz Fanon? If so, what do you think about his works and theories? The only book of his that I've read is The Wretched of the Earth. I certainly like it. It's very good in my opinion. For those of you who don't know, Frantz Fanon was a black Marxist philosopher, revolutionary. He was very active in the liberation movement of Algeria. He's sort of like Gramsci in the sense that people talk about him in universities and places like that, but they don't really treat him like he's a Marxist. It's the same thing with Gramsci. Like, Gramsci's theories of hegemony and organic philosophers and organic intellectuals, whatever, they are talked about, but Gramsci is often painted as a liberal by academia. It's sort of the same thing with Fanon. Like, he's often just talked about as a sort of a liberal, like a secular humanist. If you watch some of the lectures on YouTube, they talk about like, yeah, Fanon, he was talking about just liberation in general or problems of colonialism and stuff like that, but no, he was a fucking Marxist. He was talking about capitalist imperialism versus national liberation, socialism, Marxism. He talks about dialectics all the time. He quotes Marx, he quotes Engels all the time. Anyway, his theories I'm not an expert, I still need to read more, but at least in The Wretched of the Earth, it's very good. It talks about colonialism, decolonization of Africa. He talks about the differences of classical colonialism versus neo-colonialism. He talks about the strategies used by both the liberation fighters and the imperialists, the colonizers. He talks a lot about the colonial mindset, like the colonizer mindset and the victim, sort of victimhood, victim mindset of the oppressed nations. He criticizes bourgeois nationalism, nationalist utopia and idealism a lot. He makes a really good case that really only national liberation that is guided by Marxism-Leninism can really produce the results that we want. Bourgeois nationalists can't do it. And he makes really good points about basically just how the mindset of people is under colonialism and how that needs to change. And really good points about how the colonizers changed their tactics. They realized that we need to decolonize. And by decolonize, they don't mean we need to stop imperialism. No, they mean we need to end classic colonialism because it's too blatant. We need to change tactics. We need to decolonize. Otherwise, we need to de-imperialize. Decolonize quickly before they actually start fighting for their liberty and independence. What are your views on immigration and refugees, especially in Western Europe? It's a problem that there is massive immigration, that there's massive amounts of refugees, but it's a problem caused by imperialism. Those people who are immigrants and who are refugees, they are not to blame. They're fleeing their home countries because they're getting bombed, and because there's civil war, and because there's like terrorists, and all this shit caused by imperialism, US intervention, and other kinds of interventions and bombings and war by Western countries. So they flee towards the West, which is like the only place that's peaceful. And then, you know, people from countries that are not even war-torn at the moment, they also try to use this flood of refugees as a way of getting to the West where the money is at. So there's that. But basically all of this is caused by imperialism. Same with immigration. The European Union, for example, one of its main tenets is the free movement of people, together with the free movement of capital, because they want to be able to move money around and they want to be able to move labor around. So people from poorer European countries will move to wealthier European countries, like the imperialist European countries, you know, like from Romania and Poland to Germany and UK, and they'll be used as cheap labor and exploited. And it causes problems for the working class of those imperialist countries, but also for the immigrants themselves. So it's not a good situation when people need to essentially leave their homes because those home countries are so poor or are just under like constant threat of violence or war. But the solution is not to close down the borders or something. Like, that's not even gonna happen. You can't do that. The only way countries could actually, in Europe I mean, the only way countries could have their sovereignty back and actually control their own borders is if the European Union was dismantled. And I think that should be done, and I advocate for the dismantling of the European Union, but that's something the big capitalists and right-wingers don't want to happen. They just like to blame the immigrants themselves and the refugees themselves while they are themselves causing all the problems. Like, they bomb these countries and they complain about refugees. They want free movement of labor, but then they complain about refugees. Like, you know, you can't have it both ways. It's just hypocritical bullshit. Are Russia and China imperialist powers? Yes, they are, to a lesser degree than the West. Russia is a minor imperialist. China is a bigger imperialist, in my opinion, but the difference between Chinese imperialism and Western imperialism is that China doesn't really use violence. China invests in a lot of countries. It has invested a lot in Africa recently. You know, Lenin describes imperialism as like a number of different things. Like, he says that the period of imperialism is characterized by, you know, the finance sector becoming the most important sector, like more important than industry. He says that it's characterized by the rise of monopolies. It's characterized by export of capital becoming more important than export of commodities. And that's what China is doing. Like, China is not exporting commodities that much anymore, even though it also does that. But it's definitely exporting tons of capital to Africa and poorer countries, which is imperialist. You know, China does give these countries a better deal than the West, and they don't use violence. They don't go in, like, with tanks. They don't bomb these countries. But it's, you know, it is still imperialism. It is imperialism in the kind of the true sense of the word, because people tend to associate imperialism with invasion, when really imperialism is economic exploitation. The invasion is just what you do in order to facilitate that economic exploitation. Okay, and then his last question. What do you think about the theory of social imperialism? I assume that means the thing that the Chinese were saying about the USSR in the 60s and 70s. It makes sense. I mean, social imperialism, it's not a very complicated theory. It's like when the Soviet Union called social democrats in Germany who didn't oppose fascism enough, you know, when the Soviet Union called them social fascists. And when, in the First World War, when some revisionist socialists defended their own imperialist government's actions in World War One, Lenin called them social chauvinists. You know, social chauvinists, social fascists, social imperialists. It's just basically, we all know what imperialism is, we all know what fascism is. But when you add the word social to it, that implies that it's done by a country that considers itself sort of socialist or left-wing. So basically the Chinese communists considered that the revisionist Soviet Union was economically exploiting other countries, such as Afghanistan and Cuba and even other Eastern European countries, and that the Russian Republic was economically exploiting the smaller republics in the USSR, which during the period of Soviet revisionism was true. They were exploiting these countries economically. Like if you look at the poorer republics of the USSR, for example, in the Lenin period and the Stalin period, money from the wealthier republics would be used to develop the poorer republics to bring them to the same level as the wealthier republics. That's what they tried to do. They tried to develop those so that they would be on an equal footing, but during the period of revisionism, it was the opposite. They used the poorer republics as essentially just sources of cheap labor, cheap resources, raw materials. They had a more strict division of labor. Republics like Russia would be making like nuclear power plant reactors, and republics like Ukraine would be making fighter jets, but then there would be poorer republics like Uzbekistan. They would be just collecting cotton and sending it to Russia, where it would be made into actual textile. So yeah, I mean, I do agree with the theory of social imperialism. The conclusions they draw from that were somewhat erroneous, like the three worlds theory, but I don't really think the three worlds theory was even a theory. It was more just, basically they didn't have erroneous foreign policy because of that theory. Instead, they just wanted to have the foreign policy, and then they invented the theory to justify it. Okay, Bakura98 asks, 1. What's it like in Finland? I mean, it's nice. Not too many people, which I like. I mean, if you go to Helsinki, then there's a bunch of people, but it's not like super crazy crowded, which is nice. The weather's alright. I mean, it's not as cold as people think. I mean, it is cold, but here in the south, not so bad. You know, we have 4 seasons. There's snow in the winter, and it's pretty warm in the summer, so, I mean, it's alright. I don't really know what to tell you. I mean, I like it. Did you see that atrocious video by some guy, 8273? Yeah, I did. I know you sent me the link probably a bunch of times and I just didn't see it or something, but I finally found the video and I did watch it, and it was pretty bad, so I will probably make a separate video response to that. That should come out sometime in the near future. Thoughts on mutualism? Okay, well, mutualism, that's pretty much what Proudhon was all about, right? And Proudhon was a fucking idiot. I mean, Proudhon wrote one book that was sort of good, like the, you know, properties theft, which, I mean, it's not great, but it's okay, basically. It's kind of stupid because he says that property is theft, but, like, he talks about property, how it should be handled, but he doesn't actually talk about abolishing property, essentially. Mutualism is the worst kind of anarchism. Out of all the schools of actual anarchism, like, I don't consider anarcho-capitalism to be actual anarchism. Voluntarism and anarcho-capitalism are not real anarchism. They're just like right-wing libertarian nonsense. But mutualism is like the closest thing to that. Extreme petty bourgeois, pro-market. I mean, they claim to be left-wing. There's all these people who, like Proudhon, who consider themselves anarcho-communists or anarchists. But I mean, Proudhon was the most idealist, most market-oriented, most capitalistic, most petty bourgeois of all the classic anarchists. So I don't like mutualism at all. Out of all the schools of thought within anarchism, I like anarcho-communism and anarcho-syndicalism the most. I don't really know which one I like better. I mean, there's big flaws in both of them. Like, anarcho-communists tend to be super idealist and like super impractical, but anarcho-syndicalism on the other hand is more practical in the way it organizes in a certain way, and anarcho-syndicalists have achieved more, but anarcho-syndicalism is also, it has a big tendency to be reformist. Like, when they actually get guns and when they actually try to overthrow some shit, like they did in Catalonia, like it's more practical. It almost stops being syndicalist at that point. Like it can do that. That can happen. And in that case, it's actually pretty decent. When it's just purely syndicalist, as in purely just trade union stuff, then it has a huge tendency of being reformist. Just like, let's get better wages. To be fair to anarchists, that's not a problem with just anarchist syndicalism. That's a problem with syndicalism in general. Like, that's a problem with trade unionism in general, not just when anarchists do it. Okay, Soviet Revolutionary asks, will you fight with me in a glorious neo-bolshevik revolution? Yes, I will. I mean, I assume that's a reference to 1984, but yes, definitely. Okay, Armindo Ribeiro asks, do you think there's any legitimate alternative to single-party democratic centralism typical of Marxism-Leninism? A bunch of people asked similar questions. I don't think there's anything that's equally good, not even close, but do I think that there's anything else that could even work? Not really, I mean, maybe, like, I'm trying to think, like, the next best thing, I suppose, because, I mean, Trotskyists haven't done shit, but, I mean, anarchists, like, Catalonia was pretty decent. I'm just trying to think, like, if Catalonia had survived, then what would it look like today? I mean, would it even have survived to this day? I mean, probably not. Like, I think it would have been too small to be independent. It would have been, like, it would have probably become either a Soviet satellite or a Western satellite. If you took anarchism in a vacuum, and there's no foreign intervention or anything, could it survive, or would it degenerate? I think it probably would degenerate. It's more likely than not. I mean, then again, like, CNT Catalonia wasn't really anarchist. It just pretended to be anarchist. Like, it was led by a bunch of anarchists, but they kind of betrayed all the principles of anarchism, like anti-statism and all that shit. It's like the Proudhon people in the Paris Commune. They betrayed all their principles in order to be more practical, which is excellent, because all their principles were shit. Principles of Proudhonism. Principles of anarcho-syndicalism, like, that's all bullshit. Like, just get rid of that and do what you have to do. Like, just do communism, do socialism. Like, that's what CNTFA was doing. They were like, fuck this anarchy, it's not working, let's just do socialism. Like, no, I don't really think there's anything else that can work. I mean, unless you count Maoism or something like that, or Juche. I mean, Juche works demonstrably, but I kind of think that Juche and Maoism are both Marxism-Leninism, so I don't know. Well, maybe some kind of libertarian Marxism can also work. If you look at the Zapatistas, they are still there. They don't have any other parties, they just have the Zapatistas. But they're not strictly democratic centralists, so I suppose some kind of libertarian Marxism might work. Still Amir asks, what are your thoughts on the Cold War, basically the most anticlimactic event the left ever did? How could it have been won by the left, why it wasn't, etc.? They called Korean War the Hot War, so when they didn't just outright fight between the US and China and the USSR. It was called the Cold War, but it was still constant war, like constant proxy war at least. Constant revolution, like revolutions on every continent, and just like counter-revolutions and US interventions on every continent. How could it have been won? It would have been won if the Soviet Union had become revisionist, basically. That's the short answer. Why it wasn't? Well, the Soviets became revisionist because of circumstances, like both because of circumstances outside their control, but mainly because of political mistakes. Like, that's my biggest gripe with Stalin and biggest gripe with the Leninists in the USSR, is that they made mistakes severe enough to allow revisionism to happen. The reason I don't really usually make that kinds of arguments is that they did the best they could, and they didn't have any experience before that, and they didn't have any other country's example to follow. So it's kind of shitty to blame them for making those kinds of mistakes, because they were kind of pioneering all that. But still, like, those kinds of political mistakes allowed revisionism to happen, and then shitty policy by revisionism essentially caused all our problems. Hoxha Edits asks, why are all your videos basically on Leninism and defending Marxism-Leninism, but yet you haven't gone over a lot of Marxism? Also, other than anti-revisionism and pro-Stalin, how would you describe Hoxha? Why would I go over Marxist schools of thought that I don't agree with? Like, I'm talking about Leninism and Marxism-Leninism, like, that's what I'm a Marxist-Leninist. Do you mean that there's some specific theory of Marx that I haven't covered? I mean, there are, but is that what you mean? Hoxha, I mean, anti-revisionist and pro-Stalin, I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, he was a great revolutionary in his own country. I would say he was dogmatic. He went too far. Like, he's sometimes seen as a right deviator, because he's called like a dogmato revisionist sometimes, because he was just so anti-revisionist that it's almost revisionist, you know. But really, I mean, it's kind of ultra-left too, because like, ultra-lefts are always really sectarian, and Hoxha was kind of sectarian because of his extreme anti-revisionism, or what he perceived to be anti-revisionist. Trotskyists are like that. They're always like, oh, we're the only ideologically pure people, we have to split from everyone else. But I mean, yeah, Hoxha was a great anti-revisionist. He was pro-Stalin. He was a great revolutionary in his own country. Not so much on an international scale. Like, I don't really know how else to describe him. Congratulations on the 2K subs. Are you organized? If so, what party or why not? Also, is there a chance for a subscriber meetup? As in, are you going somewhere and wouldn't mind the company? Thanks and good luck. Well, in terms of subscriber meetup, like, if you come to Finland and you message me, then that can happen. Like, if you come to Helsinki, for example, then we can meet up. Am I organized, and what party? Yes, I am organized. I am a member of the Communist Workers' Party here in Finland. Finland has two communist parties, the Communist Party of Finland, which is a revisionist party, and the Communist Workers' Party, and I'm a member of the Communist Workers' Party. The Communist Workers' Party is a Marxist-Leninist party. I will link our Facebook page and our party website in the description. The website is kind of crummy, but it will be updated. It works, but it doesn't look too good. The Facebook page is brand new. There is also a Wikipedia page for our party, but it's kind of inaccurate. Like, half the shit there is wrong. I don't know who has made it. And it's also, like, extremely against our party, so there's that. Worthless asks, what are the best ways to participate in leftist activity in Finland? What organizations are there? How do you feel about the current Communist Party of Finland? The Communist Party of Finland is a horrible revisionist party. So what are the best ways to participate in leftist activity in Finland? Join the Communist Workers' Party and just get to work, basically. We have things to do, like, there's more work to do than there's people. We have all kinds of activity. Demonstrations, study groups, writing for our newspaper, spreading our newspaper, handing out leaflets, like, there's all kinds of things for people to do. Also, sharing our stuff on Facebook. All of that is useful. If you can't actually physically come to party events, if you live too far or some kind of thing like that, then you can at least, as I said, like, share our stuff on Facebook, talk about it, maybe start your own party cell where you live, or a party chapter. It takes 3 people to start a party chapter, but if you're all alone, then you can start a party cell. So if you have any questions about the Communist Workers' Party, and just for all you Finnish people out there, I'm gonna say the name of the party in Finnish is Kommunistinen Työväen Puolue, KTP. So that's the name of the party, KTP, Communist Workers' Party. So if you have any questions about that, then just send me a private message, or send me an email into this address. It's on the screen right now, and we'll talk more details. But just basically, that's the best way to do leftism in Finland at the moment, I think. Santa Marks from Finland asks, 1. Is the modern-day SKP worth supporting? If not, what's the better alternative? SKP is the Communist Party of Finland, or the Finnish Communist Party. Is it worth supporting? No. No, hell no. The shitty thing is that they use the name and the symbols of the old SKP, the old Communist Party of Finland, which was started by this hardcore Leninist called Otto Ville Kuusinen. It was founded by him in 1918 in Moscow, when he had fled Finland after the failed revolution. So they use the name of that party, and they use all the symbols of that party, but it's a totally different party. It's not even legally the same party, because the Communist Party of Finland actually went bankrupt in the 90s because the revisionists embezzled all the money. Like, I'm not even kidding. It's split among Gorbachevites and anti-revisionists, but after that, some people embezzled all the money and it was literally shut down. The entire Communist Party of Finland actually shut down in the 90s. And then it was recreated in, like, the late 90s. It was recreated, but they actually had to go to court to be able to use the name and not pay any of the debt that they had. So they got the rights to use the name, but it's technically not even the same party. So yeah, it's not worth supporting. And is there a better alternative? Yes, the Communist Workers' Party. So again, if you have any questions about that, email me in this address or send me a private message or something and we will talk about that. 2. Should the Finnish gun laws be more lax so workers can more easily arm themselves? It would be hard to argue for that. You can't just say like, oh, we want more lax gun laws so we can overthrow the government. That's not gonna work. I don't think you should have illegal guns. You'll get in trouble for it. But if there was actually a revolutionary situation, then, there's always ways of getting guns. 3. Do you own a gun yourself? No, I don't. But then again, if I did, would I tell you on the internet? 4. If the revolution began tomorrow, would you be willing to work with anarchists and other non-ML leftists? Yes, totally. If we agreed on a common strategy, if we agreed on common objectives, and if they did their end of the deal, then yeah, totally. Like, if the deal is, let's just kill all the right-wingers together and defeat the right-wing police force, military, militia, whatever, then yeah, totally. If we can just agree on what to do, then yeah. 5. What is your solution to dealing with the right-wing gangs and street patrols like Soldiers of Odin? Gulag.